So container cooking is really a huge thing because now you can cook anything in a thermal cooker that you couldn't otherwise. Because before, right, we talked about maximizing efficiency, it had to come to a boil. Now we're going to put things inside of a container and let it come to a boil. I have some glass containers that I use a lot, or mason jars, right? Mason jars work great. I like the pint size. I left it sitting home on my table. But let me show you how this could work with lasagna, all the different ways you could do lasagna. I figured out a way to do lasagna like we did the chicken enchiladas, sort of, where you brought the stuff to a boil, the sauce, and then layered the things in, and then you had to eat it between 2 and 4 hours to make sure it was done. Another way to do lasagna would be you just need a heat source, right? So why not make your lasagnas in the 2 pots that you've got and slide them in the oven? Why not use the oven for a heat source? And then you're using the thermal cooker, the unit, as a heater. I mean, a warmer, right? Use it as a warmer. Or get little jars like pint jars, or these little glass containers that clamp down lids. Make sure they're sealed. They're the kind that are airtight, and you can make little lasagnas in those. 2 of those stack inside the 7 liter. Or
glass containers, are they plastic?
They're plastic. The plastic is good to heat up to 270 degrees. It'll go that hot with those lids. I don't think they're going to last forever, but they do pretty good for what they are.
So any plastic lid?
It has to be the clamp ones. No, it has to be those ones that are on glass, and they clamp down. They're the certain ones. And I think mine were dirty and I forgot to bring them, but they're on my website. If you go to cindyscents.com, I have pictures on there, okay? And also on Facebook, and I have a group and a page. So if you have any questions, that's a great place. I answer that a lot. Back to lasagna. So let's say I have pints and I'm cooking a meal for 2. I'm going to put 2 pints layer my little lasagnas in 2 of them. And this is how this big, huge pot makes food for 2 instead of 10, okay? Is use container cooking. And then you can utilize the big pot. So I put the 2 pint size, I make lasagnas and I put them in those 2. Maybe in 2 of these I put some bread. Make sure you put the lids on. They don't have to be new lids, just lids with rings. And then they can be submerged. And maybe 2 more of these with some kind of dessert, okay? And they go all in one. The 2 will stack, and then you've got 4 of them. 4 stacks will fit into the 7 liter. Cover them with water, bring it to a boil. So they're 75% full, you cover them. Bring it to a boil for 15 minutes and put them in here and then go. And you've got a meal for 2.
I maybe missed it, but do they all have to be off the bottom?
No.
They could be sitting on the bottom in the water.
Mm-hmm. This is what I do all the time. And I got in this habit because I use so much glass. Even if I'm putting these in, which are metal, and I'll show you this in just a minute because this is the bread container. I always put my things down in first and then add my water. That's so that I don't get in the habit of having a hot pan and trying to add my glass jars and I'm breaking stuff. So I just get in the habit of I'm adding my water after them bringing everything to a boil. That's just how I've done it from the beginning, okay? So, but now can you see 3 different ways that we actually cooked lasagna using a thermal cooker? So be creative. So container cooking, if I can do it in glass and I can do it in metal, why can't I do it in oven bags? Isn't that what they're for? For cooking, right? And these are cleanable. I usually don't clean them right now because I throw them away because they're inconvenient. But they're sort of expensive, and I was using them all myself. I just clean them and use them again. So I made just some. Now what would I do if I was at home with this? This is chicken. All I did is put chicken in there, chicken pieces, chicken tenders. I cut them up, put a bunch of Sweet Baby Ray's over the top. You guys are actually sort of lucky because see, I pulled potatoes out. See, the potatoes are in the bottom. Okay, that one's I noticed the Yukon get a little more waterlogged than others. But since I didn't have enough potatoes, I have sweet potatoes. They're even better than regular potatoes, right? Okay. So I put those on the bottom, and we'll just cut those up for you. And you can try those. And we're going to need some little plates and things when we get that far. And then I've got, these are just really tender. It makes the most tender meat ever. But what I would do with these, if I was at home, I would add Ultra Gel and thicken up that sauce. because there's not water in here. This is the juices out of the meat, and it's the sweet baby rays. That's all that's in there. And these are just really tender. So anyway, so they're really good. You can try those. And I did beans. I just found these kind at the store. I didn't realize that they had them. But they're Roman beans. I'll find stuff to serve when we get that far. My bread that I made in the 5.5, right? Yay, 5.5. Okay, so when it comes to bread, I did this in my container without the top on it because that's the size of dough I already had weighed out, and I pulled it out of the freezer this morning and set it out to let it rise. But this one is a 1.3 pound loaf, and I know that they have them here. And the trivet, you'll want to use the trivet if you have the 7 liter one, because then you're maximizing efficiency. If I put my bread, this cannot be submerged, so you can see where my water line would be. Is it 75% or 80% full? It's not. So if I had the trivet, now it is, right? Because it's clear up here. So trivets, as far as this, are really important for things. Mm-hmm. Not for this. What I used instead, did I talk about things being hot? The strings. Okay? And you'll have to see, if it depends on which, see this glass container is a little bit different glass container. It doesn't have a lid, and I have to use tin foil. But it makes a bigger loaf. So I'm really tossed between the two.
That is just one you have in your kitchen.
Yeah, it's a stainless steel, it's a display pan actually. So you can find any containers that you can find to use. Yes? Any dough you want, really. This right here is half kamut and half white. It's the one that's in my book.
And is that a full recipe like in your book?
No, I have one recipe that's a full recipe in my book. One for one loaf. I do have a recipe in there for one loaf if you had to make one loaf. But what I've been doing is I make the bigger one, and then I break it, I divide it way out and put them in Ziplocs in the freezer, and then just pull one out in the morning and cook it later.
But how much do you divide out?
It depends on the weight. So this is 1.8 pounds. For this one, this is 1.3. Okay?
That's in the book?
Which size they are. Yeah, or whichever size. What I would do is you want your dough ball about half to 2/3 to take up a half to 2/3 of your pan. So whichever pan you find, you'll want to put that amount of dough in and then measure it. Okay?
Do you let it raise?
This time, because my dough had been in the freezer and it was still not really, it was still a little cool to the touch, I let it raise a little bit today to get up to about here before I put it in the water. Because I put it in cold water and then let it boil. So it actually raises as it's in there. But usually I don't. So today I made you, this is my cinnamon roll bread. See how pretty? I cannot make cinnamon rolls without chocolate chips, by the way. I know. So it has chocolate chips in it for you. Okay. My bread dough's in here. Put it down into the pot. And then I'm going to put water in it. As soon as that pot lifts, because it will start to float, because there's so much air in it, starts to float, then I turn off the water, put the lid on it, and put it on the stove. Bring it to a boil. I boil for 15 minutes. But like I mentioned earlier, I have a friend who has a different container. It's sort of like this, but smaller. It's taller, but it's like this big around, okay? And what I noticed with hers is she doesn't have to boil it as long because it doesn't have so far to go into the center, right? And it's taller, and there's more water that gets real hot and retains that heat. So it retains a little better, so she doesn't need as much of a boil. Yeah. Yeah, it'll just get rusty eventually. Yeah, I've used tin. I started with a tin can that was about. It was like a peanut can about this size. Like when you make cinnamon rolls, how you lay it out. I put the stuff on and rolled it up, and then I twisted it around. Does that make sense? You can see that it's been twisted. That's how I made it. Okay. Good.